What is going on, everyone on YouTube? Today we're going to be talking about shotgun slugs again, but we're going to do it in a different light. But let me show you the examples first that I'm going to be using, and then we'll get into the video. This is a Remington Slugger, 1 ounce slug, Federal Power Shock slug, okay? And I'm going to show you the boxes. Here is the Remington Slugger box, and then here is the Federal Power Shock box, okay? So I had a YouTuber, a fellow YouTuber, comment on my video, and he asked me, hey, you did a lethality and range video for the number 4, number 1, and double up buckshot. Can you do the same thing with slugs? Absolutely, and that's what we're doing today. So let me show you the whiteboard, and then let's get talking about it. So as you can see right up here, 63 foot-pounds. Where does that number come from? If you saw my previous video, you already know where it came from, but for the people who are seeing this for the first time, 63 foot-pounds is the minimum amount of energy that the FBI says is required for a projectile to be lethal. And that, we also found out in our previous video, that you need 63 foot-pounds to penetrate that 12 to 18 inches, okay? And that's what we need to make sure that we remain lethal, right? So 63 foot-pounds of energy means we're gonna get that 12 to 18 inches of penetration, okay? So let's go over the muzzle velocities and also the velocity of the projectiles at range and also according with their energy foot-pounds. Now, Federal Power Shock and the Remington Slugger are both 438 grain projectiles, which means they're 1 ounce. I mean, we kind of figure that's usually the weight, right? It's all the same. However, the Federal comes out of the barrel a little bit faster than the Remington. So the Federal is 1610 feet per second, while the Remington is 1560 feet per second. And also your mileage may vary depending on altitude, barrel length, etc., right? But we're just gonna take Remington and Federal for their word. So that way we can talk about this calculation. So we are talking about at what range, basically, does the projectile stop being lethal? So let's just go over this very quickly, right? So right here is, again, feet per second for the Federal, and right here is feet per second on the Remington. So at 125 yards at the end, this is basically the last data point that both Federal and Remington give me. So the Federal at 125 yards is 1068, okay? So it's already basically going into subsonic. It's basically going in, transonic, whatever, where it's changing from supersonic to subsonic. Now, the Remington Slugger at 125 yards is at 942 feet per second. Now, that is absolutely subsonic, and then where it's basically entering the transonic point is at 75 yards. So that's pretty interesting. The Remington, again, at 75 is almost the same as the Federal at 1068, which is very important to notice. However, the energy foot-pounds is what we're looking at, right? So at 125 yards, the Federal energy foot-pounds is 1109. The Remington is at 862. That is still way more than the 63 foot-pounds that we need to remain lethal. So whether one is going faster than the other, we are still in excess of energy foot-pounds by a bunch. Like, that's basically 800 more foot-pounds than what you need. And this is out of the Remington. So that's a crap ton. You're not going to run out of energy foot-pounds with a slug. It is going to be lethal if you make a hit. I ended up doing some calculations, and Tal Flatermouse, which I'm going to reference him now, Tal Flatermouse was talking about how every 10 yards, a slug loses about 10% of its energy. I found that to be inaccurate, but I decided to do some math and, just do it anyway. Because if, like I said, from here to here, the energy foot-pounds, from here to here, that's not 10%. That's actually way more. I think it's like 17%, 16%, 15%, 14%, 13%, or something like that. That's the difference on the way it goes down. And I'm using the Federal Power Shock as an example here, right? So it's definitely not 10%. However, it didn't matter which way I calculated it, using basically I'm basically measuring the difference between here, and it's losing like 1%, every 25 yards, this loses 17%, but right here, 16%, right here was 15, right here was 14%. So everywhere in between, it was losing like 1%. Okay. But no matter what happened, at 300 yards, calculating it the way Tal Fledermaus is calculating it, or basically me kind of assuming how it ends up working here, we still had an excess of 63 foot-pounds at 300 or 350 yards in that range. It didn't matter. But that's not the problem with shotgun slugs. The problem with Tal Fledermaus, with the example that Tal Fledermaus gave, was about slug accuracy and stability. So he had the shotgun aiming about, basically at a target, directly flat. He was on a table, and he was trying to hit a drum. I think the drum maybe was like 4 feet tall, 4.5 feet tall, whatever. So he was aiming at the top of the drum, and the shotgun was parallel to the floor. So here's my sight, here's the drum, I'm aiming down range, and you know what happened? At 200 yards, that slug was hitting the floor. And I'm like, that's pretty interesting. That is a 2 3/4 inch slug, and I think he was using Winchester Super X. Not a fan of those. However, it proves a point. Now, he did a second video where he had a 3-inch slug, and he was trying to do the same thing. And it was like a 6-foot door at 500 yards, and he was aiming directly at the door. And when the shotgun, again, was parallel to the floor, instead of 200, I think one time he got like 210 yards with the 2 3/4. With a 3-inch shell, he only was able to get 270 yards. Now, when he tilted the gun back about 45 degrees, he was able to hit 390 yards. However, anything past 200 yards was not a guaranteed hit, and the accuracy was diminished. Basically, it was like he was shooting it up, and then they didn't know where the slug was going, which is really, really bad. You always want to be accountable for all your shots. So 200 yards basically was the point where it's like, okay, you're done. That's it. I'm assuming if you're at a higher elevation and you're shooting something that's down, you can get it to go farther, maybe more accurately. But the problem is the bullet drop is so damn bad that if the gun is anywhere parallel to the floor, it's just going to hit the floor somewhere between 200 and 270 yards, depending if you have a 2 3/4 or your 3-inch shells. Now, real quick, questions. Accuracy at 150 to 200 yards. That is questionable. That is seriously questionable, because most people say that a slug is good up to 150 yards. If you notice, Remington and Federal give us the information up to 125. They don't give me any data at 150, which is pretty interesting. Maybe they're kind of telling us like, hey, don't be shooting a slug at 150 or more yards, because we can't account for it. And also you as a shooter cannot account for it either. So energy foot-pounds at 150 to 200 yards, you still have a lot. Again, let's revisit. Federal Power Shock, at 125 you have 1109, and then on the Remington we have 862. I don't give a flying crap. At 150 or 200, there's no way you're going to lose this energy foot-pounds. Basically, it's never going to drop at 200 yards, and I'm telling you this, at 200 yards, it is not going to drop below 63 foot-pounds. So it is going to maintain lethality. You just will not be able to maintain accuracy. That's the problem, okay? So the Tal Fledermaus test, he stated at the end of one of the videos, put you too low. At the end of one of the videos on the 2 3/4 inch, he said at 200 yards, the slug is traveling around 200 feet per second. I don't know how you drop from 1068 at 125 to 200 feet per second at 200 yards. I think he's wrong about it. But on the 3-inch video, and I made sure I kind of rewinded like a few times, like 5 times, he said the 3-inch at 200 yards was about 400 feet per second. So I don't know what's going on with his numbers or his data, but either way, regardless, I don't think it's that low. And even if it was traveling, let's just say 400 to 300 feet per second, you still have the energy foot-pounds. Now at 200 feet per second with the weight of the projectile, at that point, you actually go under 63 foot-pounds if you want to do your own calculation. But either way, putting this back up here. So hopefully that helps you guys out. The issue with lethality on a shotgun slug, it is not energy foot-pounds. If you want to use it as artillery fire because that's all you got and your situation calls for it legally, it's still questionable, okay? But energy foot-pounds with 150 yards and in, you're all good. I think the accuracy at 150 yards is probably still okay. I've seen people hit targets at 150 yards with red dots on a shotgun, and that should be pretty easy. But at 200 yards, if you're trying to aim at something that is basically 6 feet tall and you're aiming directly at it, expect your slug to hit the floor at 200 yards, especially if you're using 12 gauge slugs that are 2 3/4 inch, okay? So that's all I have to say for this. And you guys have a blessed day. If you guys liked what you saw, like, comment, share. And I'm always willing to hear you guys' feedback. And if you have an idea for a video or you want me to make a video specific about shotguns, like, hey, can you talk about this topic like I did on this video, please comment down below and let me know what you want to hear, okay? You guys take it easy.